It is already December 9th, 2021. Thanks for watching the Calvary briefing today. Donny Friederichsen is a pastor in Southlake, Texas, and he recently wrote an article entitled, "Be Forgettable!" Exclamation point. That caught my attention. Be forgettable. And as he wrote this article, he went to an individual whose name appears in the New Testament 5 times. There's a good chance that you don't know much about a guy by the name of Tychicus. If you've read the New Testament, you've seen his name, but you've likely read over it and moved on without a second thought. Well, who was Tychicus? We find his name in Acts 20, verse 4, Ephesians 6, verse 21, Colossians 4, verse 7, 2 Timothy 4:12, and Titus 3:12. Tychicus appeared near the end of Paul's missionary work in Ephesus, and it's possible that he was a convert there, that he started to believe in Jesus Christ as a part of Paul's ministry in that city. And if that happened, he witnessed something rather remarkable, which was a riot caused by a silversmith by the name of Demetrius, whose life's work in making idols was being challenged by Paul's preaching of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Tychicus likely delivered several of Paul's letters to their recipients. He delivered the letter to the Ephesians. He delivered the letter to the Colossians. He accompanied Onesimus, the former runaway slave who had been converted, when he went back to Colossae. And he probably carried Paul's letter to Philemon. If this is the case, Paul entrusted his child, Onesimus, to Tychicus when he returned him to Philemon. Paul must have had a tremendous amount of faith in Tychicus to handle that potentially difficult situation. It's likely that Tychicus was a scribe for a couple of Paul's letters to the Ephesians and to the Colossians. Paul would have likely dictated those letters. Maybe he even talked through some of the issues with Tychicus as they were putting the letter together, maybe even talking about the Trinity. Then Tychicus, because he delivered the letter, probably was the first person to ever preach from the book of Ephesians, because he brought that letter to the believers there and probably read it as the bearer of that letter. Tychicus was clearly a faithful follower who found himself at the center of much of the history of the New Testament. But he was in the background for nearly every significant event that we find in the New Testament. You've likely never thought about him. Maybe he was one of the most important people in the New Testament as he brought these letters to churches that we still use today, and yet, for the most part, he's completely unknown. The British New Testament scholar E.K. Simpson writes this about Tychicus: that we don't know much about him speaks to his desire to make the gospel known more than himself. We live in a culture that tends to value people who entertain us, people who are up front, people who are in the spotlight. We don't really honor those who call us to simple holiness. Even in the church, we can be prone to follow celebrities in the whole Christian America that we live in. As we think about people like Tychicus, we realize that if it weren't for people like him, the church wouldn't be where it is today. We're in a dangerous position as we sometimes fall into honoring the fame culture more than the faithful culture. But the church needs people like you and me who are utterly forgettable, people who desire to make the gospel known more than themselves. The church needs more people like Tychicus. The church needs faithful Christians who want to make the gospel known and don't care if they are ever known. Tychicus was a follower of Jesus, and he probably heard Paul talk a lot about Jesus, often using the words that Paul wrote to the Philippians. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped at, but he emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. It's December. We remember Jesus becoming man and living among us. Think about Tychicus this month. Be like Tychicus. Be forgettable.